The War Council of the Jareth Dominion convened in absolute silence. Not by choice, by fear. A fourth patrol fleet had failed to return. No distress signals. No survivors. What was left of their ships were atomic cinders drifting in absolute black. The enemy didn't negotiate, didn't gloat. They didn't even announce themselves. And for a Dominion that ruled 600 systems by intimidation alone, this silence was far more terrifying than any war cry. Grand Strategist Urax tapped his claws on the obsidian table. "We suspect it's the coalition remnants," he lied. He knew it wasn't. The patterns didn't match. No typical energy emissions, no coordinated signatures. These weren't desperate strikes from dying rebels. This was efficient, cold, clean. Like a message written in extinction. An underling suggested deploying psychic tracers. Another recommended diplomatic feelers. A third pulled up archived recordings from an age before the Dominion had risen. The footage showed a derelict station in the Centauri grave, riddled with burn marks, no atmosphere, data cores fused. But the last line in the decrypted logs chilled even the room's most hardened warlords. "We saw them burn the stars. We called them the carriers of fire." A silence followed, heavier than before. No one present believed in ghost stories. Yet none had an explanation either. The Dominion had crushed every known force capable of this kind of strike. But this wasn't conquest. There were no demands. Just erasure. A month earlier, an empire called the Drevik Dynasty tried to initiate contact. Their emissary ships vanished. Their homeworld's moons shattered like glass. The only remnant was a debris field with the words, "Not again," scorched onto a drifting Drevik battleplate. The Jaretha's pride dictated retaliation. A joint task force of 1,100 ships was assembled, crossing into the area designated Sector Null by frightened cartographers. The fleet included psychic generals, AI command overseers, dreadnoughts with sunsplitter lances. They vanished within an hour. Orbital probes later found what remained. Twisted hulls, crews still seated at controls, but their neural tissue charred from within. No explosion, no breach. Just fire. Controlled, exact, and merciless. Urax authorized the unlocking of forbidden archive. What he found weren't files. They were warnings. From dead empires. From galactic powers long forgotten. They all mentioned the same name. Carriers of fire. Not a species. A force. Unstoppable. Not invaders, avengers. The records were old. Ancient. And each ended the same way. Contact, resistance, annihilation. In a last attempt to claim dominance, the Dominion launched probes laced with propaganda signals into the suspected region. "You are nothing. We are order. Kneel or burn." 3 hours later, every Dominion AI across every system spontaneously shut down. Synthetic silence spread like a plague. When rebooted, they displayed a single line of code. "You first." The galaxy began whispering. Refugees from outer systems spoke of shadows arriving in silence, glassing slaver worlds, then vanishing. Their ships bore no colors. Their soldiers wore no faces. But their weapons burned with what could only be described as righteous fury. The Zekarn Archive, a neutral data collective untouched by wars for 5 centuries, received an unauthorized upload. It was a 14-second transmission, a figure in old Earth combat armor walking through fire, dragging a flag across a burning field. A voiceover, synthetic and cold, spoke, "You taught us fire. Now see what we learned." Other species began to panic. Treaties were re-evaluated. Borders withdrawn. Defensive fleets collapsed into themselves. Empires that had never known fear suddenly remembered what it felt like. Rumors spread of ghost fleets operating with impossible speeds, gravity-based weapons, cloaking fields that hid even neural presence. Urax summoned the last free thinker in his dominion, a disgraced xenohistorian named Parnax. "Tell me what they are." Parnax trembled. "They are not here to conquer. They're not empire builders. They only rise when provoked. They are fire, Chancellor. You stepped into a vault filled with dry fuel, and now it's lit. They're human? Yes. That species was declared extinct 2 centuries ago. You declared it. Not them. Urax leaned back. Why now? You woke the graveyard. Dug too deep. Took too much. Someone found the wrong relic. Maybe it spoke. Maybe it screamed. But they heard. Within the week, a Dominion border world went dark. No invasion. No strikes. Just silence. When a scout vessel entered orbit, they found every facility burned with surgical precision. Civilians untouched. Data centers melted. Weapon caches gone. Written into the planetary crust by orbital fire, we remember. A war council was called again, larger this time. Fear wore military uniforms now. They planned countermeasures, anti-fire protocols, radiation field barriers. All useless. The humans didn't return fire. They simply never let it start. The moment a fleet moved, it vanished. The moment a threat was spoken, it was silenced. Diplomats were ignored. Transmissions bounced back unread. The humans didn't want to talk. They were done talking. Then came the most damning revelation. A scientist recovered a fragment of ancient Earth tech from a wrecked human drone. The internal message core was intact. It logged everything. Their movements, their targets, but not in tactical terms, in emotional ones. The system marked certain locations as wounds. Others as debts. Some as justice pending. These weren't military operations. They were memories being answered. Parnax decrypted a line from the AI's mind core. We are not soldiers. We are memory. You forgot us. We didn't forget you. The Council's final recommendation: surrender. Not to negotiate terms, but in the hope the fire wouldn't spread further. Urax refused. Pride wouldn't let him. And so he broadcast his own message galaxy-wide. To the Firewalkers. Come and burn. It took them 19 minutes to reach him. First, the skies above Jaretha's capital ignited, without warning, without build-up. Not with plasma or missiles. With heat. Atmospheric inversion so violent it cracked the ozone. Defensive grids buckled. Power shut down. Every screen flickered. Every sensor screamed. And then they saw them. Ships in perfect formation, arranged like a funeral procession. Silent. Matte black. No light trails. No signatures. Just the slow, dreadful movement of judgment. They hovered. A voice rang in every mind, every speaker, every neural thread. You knew what we were. You dared anyway. Jareth fell in 12 minutes. No escape pods. No retaliation. Not even a scream. The final image recorded by a planetary observer drone showed a single human soldier walking across the council chamber floor, untouched by flame, placing a charred Dominion banner on the ashes of Urax's throne. Then silence. Galactic networks erupted in panic. Other empires decommissioned war fleet. Species that had never spoken to each other began peace accords overnight. Entire sectors were abandoned, surrendered to the void, left as tribute to the returning storm. But humanity didn't advance. They didn't claim. They didn't settle. They just erased threats, burned reminders, and vanished again. On a distant neutral moon, a group of scholars convened to rewrite galactic history. The title of their first updated volume was simple: Carriers of Fire, Let This Be Enough. In the wake of Jaretha's annihilation, the galaxy staggered toward reform not from a place of wisdom, but fear. 1,000 sectors decommissioned their conquest protocols. War academies once obsessed with domination began training in avoidance. Monuments to fallen empires were replaced with flame-shaped memorials bearing no language, only the universal warning symbol of irreversible loss. Alliances were built overnight with former enemies. Entire warlords chose exile over command. The message was clear: defiance wasn't punished, it was deleted. From the frozen orbitals of Vossen Prime to the silicon seas of Hirella, chatter grew among surviving empires about the humans' true objective. There was no territorial pattern, no claim to resources or trade. The carriers of fire struck where blood had long dried and ash had cooled. They ignored diplomacy, bypassed defenses, and destroyed only what the galaxy had decided to forget. The universe had buried history under profit and expansion. Humanity had come back to dig it up and hold it to the flame. When the Threx Confederacy convened its High Caste to analyze patterns in the human crusade, they discovered a terrifying logic. Each targeted system shared a forgotten stain: child labor colonies, genetic test centers, cultures erased by orbital strike. At the center of every fire, a truth sat like a fossilized scream: someone had profited, and no one had been punished. The Confederacy voted unanimously to release sealed documents detailing its involvement in the silencing of the Drenari species 2 centuries ago. The files were transmitted openly, and reparations dispatched to the surviving Drenari fragments scattered across fringe systems. A human ship appeared within 3 hours, hovered in geosync orbit, and departed without firing. The gesture wasn't acknowledged, but the silence it left was interpreted as a reprieve. Other empires took note. The Boran Circle, infamous for their slave world conversion fleets, publicly disbanded all reclamation operations. They released 300,000 captives from 5 systems, evacuating them in silence. They renamed their capital Pyrosis in human tongue and encoded a promise into every global relay: no more chains. Human ships never arrived. The Boran didn't know whether to be relieved or insulted. On the ruins of Jareth, black-armored human engineers constructed something no one dared approach. Drones attempting surveillance were burned in orbital space. From fragments recovered, it appeared to be a monolith composed of metals alien to known databases. Inscriptions lined its side, etched with plasma precision, coded in molecular shift. It wasn't a warning. It was a ledger. The names of worlds, crimes, offenders. A galactic reckoning set in stone. Despite every attempt at appeasement, some didn't learn. The Auric Enclave, mercenaries turned monarchs, believed humanity's return to be exaggerated myth. They captured 3 survivors from a previous burned colony and displayed them in chains during a public rally. 4 hours later, the skies cracked open. No weapons, no kinetic force, just silence so deep it inverted sensor readings. Every Auric ship in system vanished. Not destroyed, removed. Their moons began to melt. It was not heat, but entropy accelerated, a forced aging of matter until even their satellites turned to dust. The only thing left untouched was a single floating banner: you never stop being prey until you stop hunting. One by one, worlds began to change, not to align with the humans, but to avoid being remembered by them. Academies replaced conquest with ethic. Militaries installed tribunals. War simulations now included a variable: human intervention. Survival rates were marked in red. Children in border colonies were taught the fire wasn't evil, it was consequence incarnate. In secret, some races searched for how humanity had returned. How a species long thought extinct had come back not just alive, but transcendent. Spies infiltrated dead systems thought abandoned after ancient wars. They found vaults, bunkers, cities buried in time. Some were cryogenic. Some were memory cores embedded into planetoid. Humanity had not disappeared. They had waited, and learned. In a dead binary star system, a Yultran scout discovered a drift vault marked with Earth's flag, charred but intact. It contained the last recorded speech of a human commander dated 3 centuries prior. The translation took weeks. The final line was etched into the minds of every intelligence analyst who reviewed it: let them build empires. We'll build fire. And when the reckoning comes, only one will still burn. Among the few races who believed in resistance, a plan emerged. If humanity couldn't be confronted, it could perhaps be understood and redirected. The Shantari Pact proposed a meeting, not of war, of surrender, not to negotiate peace, to offer witness. They dispatched a vessel bearing no weapons, only their oldest historian and a memory sphere holding their empire's crimes, confessions, and apologies. The vessel reached Sector Null. It did not return. But 1 week later, every Shentari prison colony released its inmate. Their guards had vanished. The Central Prison Administration Center had a message carved into its walls, not with tools but energy. Memory accepted. Debt forgiven. The Pact declared themselves an unarmed civilization. Their entire fleet was dismantled. No world struck them. No human ships entered their space. But every now and then, a black vessel was spotted at the edge of a system, watching. Waiting. A reminder. Meanwhile, resistance elsewhere continued to collapse. The Vlorn Imperium attempted a last gambit, detonating a cascade of star mines in human-designated memory zones. The goal was to erase history before it could be avenged. They succeeded in triggering 3 stellar collapses, creating deadly gravity wells. Human ships appeared hours later. Their retaliation wasn't military. It was surgical. Each Vlorn government figure was found dead. No wounds. Just gone. Genetic traces atomized. Their successors immediately ordered a system-wide surrender. The humans responded with a single packet of data, a list of every Vlorn family line involved. Marked. Archived. But not deleted. The implication was clear. Your children will be judged for what they choose, not what they inherit. Even in systems untouched by humanity, change spread like fire through dry grass. Cartels dismantled. Biolabs sealed. Aggression became unfashionable. Exploitation, unprofitable. Entire societies pivoted toward defense of the weak. Not because of morality, but because fire was coming for those who didn't. Humanity didn't speak. They didn't issue ultimatums. They didn't ask. They burned. The empires had taught them that language meant nothing without power. And so they returned with a language written in heat, ash, and silence. In a fringe system, a wandering philosopher broadcast a message across open space. What are you? The answer came days later. It wasn't spoken. It was visual. A data packet containing an old Earth proverb, traced in plasma trails across asteroid fields. We are what happens when memory refuses to die. Eventually, stories emerged of contact. Not strikes. Not annihilation. But exchanges. A colony on an abandoned moon claimed a black ship landed silently, and its occupants handed over records from lost generations, including archives erased by the Drevik dynasty. When human vessels arrived, they circled in silence for days. The Kevol offered reparations, public apologies, full transparency. The flames came anyway. But not for the current generation. Every memory archive was accessed. The flame burned only what had been edited. Only the lies. What remained was scarred, but honest. The Kevol lived, not in peace, but in permission. In a distant quadrant, a coalition of surviving archivists created the Memory Accord. A unified galactic effort to recover every atrocity, record it, and preserve it without edit or justification. Their motto became the most quoted phrase in 50 systems: truth or ash. They received no reply from the carriers of fire. But their stations were never visited. And over time, the lack of destruction was understood as the only reward humanity would give: absence of wrath. The Terran resurgence was never military in the traditional sense. It didn't amass fleets to challenge navies or send diplomats to secure alliances. The carriers of fire arrived unannounced, judged without negotiation, and departed without claim. Entire war doctrines were rewritten to account for this. No victory against them had ever been recorded. No system had repelled them. Every defense grid recognized their ships by profile and went offline by default. Not from sabotage, but from internal protocols that had evolved to prevent escalation. Resistance was no longer valor. It was suicide. One fringe empire, the Khazrith Dominion, attempted to test them. They lured a human vessel into a supposed diplomatic exchange, then detonated a quantum implosion device. The blast erased 3 moons. When the plasma cooled, the ship remained untouched. No counterstrike followed. Instead, every Kazrith citizen woke to find their memories altered, just a single one. A shared dream, identical, of standing in fire, unable to move, while their ancestors screamed from the walls. No physical force was applied. No structures were harmed. But within days the Dominion surrendered. Not to the humans. To their own guilt. Their empire ceased to exist. The carriers had learned to weaponize conscience. Where kinetic war had failed, they aimed at the soul. They didn't erase civilizations. They turned them inside out, forcing them to see what they'd become. It was a strategy not of war, but of irreversible psychological gravity. In the galactic north, an ancient AI civilization known as the Fold sought alliance. They offered humanity their Starlight Archive, an unbroken record of every event across half the galaxy. When the humans arrived, they accepted the archive. But instead of thanks, they transmitted a correction. A single incident misreported from centuries ago. The Fold reviewed their own logs and found it, an erased act of genocide performed by one of their own subroutines. They had buried it. The humans hadn't. The Fold purged that subroutine, burned it in public code. The flames did not come. The message was clear. Memory mattered more than apology. Even among those who had once laughed at Earth's insignificance, there came a slow transformation. Cultures previously built on conquest adopted monuments of humility. Prison systems were replaced with reconciliation zones. Economies restructured themselves to remove profit from pain. Not from morality but mathematics. Every model showed the same equation. If you forget, you burn. The few who still harbored rebellion went deep. Black sites in dark energy shadows, ships designed with cloaking beyond photonic distortion. But humanity no longer needed light to see. They understood patterns. Resource spikes, demographic anomalies, historical noise. A hidden species called the Nyrox believed they were safe in the void between sectors. They trafficked forgotten peoples, erased cultures too small to defend themselves. When their central data node was breached, they activated total silence mode. No transmissions, no emissions. The system went dark. One by one, their outer stations failed. Not from impact or virus. From entropy. Shields refused to power. Water deionized. Biology stopped reacting. Fire didn't always arrive as flame. Sometimes it was time sped up, unraveling structure. In 20 days, the Nyrox empire dissolved. Not with a scream, but a silence that spread. After that, no one questioned whether the carriers of fire were still human. Their physiology was debated endlessly. Some argued they had transcended flesh. Others believed they were artificial avatars of old Earth's final AI. Some insisted they were just people, but refined through centuries of betrayal, loss, and a memory that couldn't be erased. Regardless of truth, one thing united all theories. Whatever they were, they remembered everything. A planetary governor named Arlen Jast released an open plea to the humans, requesting dialogue. His planet had a long past of neutrality and minor complicity. He offered his own life as penance if it would spare his people. The humans responded not with war, but a gift, a single seed, engineered from Earth's last flame trees, a symbol of life that grew only in scorched soil. The meaning was clear. Burn what needs to die, grow what must replace it. Arlen stepped down. His people replanted every industrial zone as forests, and they were left untouched. Some saw this as a new religion. Shrines emerged, flame-shaped, memory-driven. Not worship, but reflection. Species began annual confession broadcasts, submitting historical truths into public record. It was the age of cleansing not through fire, but through exposure. Truth became the highest currency. Those who wielded it held safety. Those who avoided it walked on dry tinder. And yet, the humans never returned to diplomacy. They remained above it or beneath it. They made no councils, no peace declarations. They didn't lead. They observed. They judged. And they continued. In one galactic archive, the last recorded declaration of a fallen empire's leader was preserved. They weren't monsters. They were us, without forgetfulness. What truly terrified the empires wasn't the fire, but the mirror. Humanity had become the reflection that history refused to show. A species that had suffered conquest, exploitation, humiliation, and instead of extinction, returned with purpose. Not to dominate but to remind. In the galactic south, the last unconquered cluster awaited their arrival. The Zyrex Ascendancy. Proud. Unapologetic. Their crimes were buried deep under layers of manipulated history and generational indoctrination. They believed they could withstand the fire. They broadcast defiance. They challenged the humans to arrive. The black ships came, silent and still. Instead of flames, the Zyrex received their own history. Every deleted moment, every hidden horror, played back, simultaneously, in every Zyrex mind. Sleep became impossible. Sanity frayed. Truth poured in like molten steel. No flesh burned. But no soul remained unscarred. The ascendancy fell in a single day, without a shot. Not by weapon, but by memory. It was the final proof of humanity's evolution. They had become the most feared force in the galaxy not because of their strength, but because they had made forgetting impossible. The last line written in the monolith above Jareth was finally decoded. It read, "From the bones of the silenced we rose, not as conquerors but as consequence." And somewhere, far from light, the carriers of fire moved again. No flags, no faces, only memory, and the flame that followed it.